I overheard my wife planning to divorce me. Not just leave me. Take everything I had worked for. So I stayed silent, and I prepared. Folks, Uncle Mickle here. I'm not proud of everything I'm about to tell you, but it's the truth. And sometimes the truth doesn't come wrapped in forgiveness or pretty endings. Sometimes it comes cold, heavy, and earned the hard way. If you've ever trusted someone with your whole life, only to realize they were already packing it up behind your back, then you might want to stick with me for this one. This happened a few years back, on an ordinary Tuesday evening, the kind you forget as soon as it passes. I was 46 years old at the time, married just over 18 years. Same house, same job, same routines. I thought I knew where I stood in the world. Turns out, I was standing on a trapdoor. I remember the exact moment because life has a funny way of slowing down when it's about to change you forever. I'd come home early from work with a headache, planning to grab a sandwich and lie down for a bit. The house was quiet, too quiet for that time of day. My wife, Sarah, had been in the other room. I could hear her voice drifting down the hallway. She was on the phone. At first, I didn't think anything of it. Couples talk. People vent. I set my keys down quietly, not wanting to interrupt her call. But then I heard my name. Not spoken warmly. Not casually. Spoken carefully. I froze. I wasn't eavesdropping on purpose. I wasn't sneaking or spying. I was just standing there, holding my breath, listening to the woman I'd built a life would describe how she was going to end it. She talked about lawyers, about timing, about money, about how she'd wait out just a little longer so things would look right. She laughed, a soft, almost relieved laugh, and said something I'll never forget. He has no idea. He still thinks everything's fine. That sentence landed harder than anything else she said. I stood there, heart pounding, stomach tight, feeling like I was watching my own life through a cracked window. Every word felt unreal, like it belonged to someone else's story. But it was mine. Every syllable cut a little deeper. I didn't confront her. I didn't slam the door or make a sound. I didn't even breathe right. I walked back out of the house as quietly as I came in, sat in my truck, and stared straight ahead, hands on the steering wheel, trying to understand how a marriage could dissolve without a single argument, without a warning siren loud enough to wake me up. Because here's the thing. Up until that moment, I thought we were okay. Not perfect. No marriage ever is. But solid. Stable. The kind of relationship you assume will just keep going because it always has. I thought wrong. What she didn't know, what she couldn't have known, was that something in me switched on that day. Not anger. Not revenge. Awareness. The kind that makes you stop reacting and start watching, listening, planning. For the next 30 days, I played my role perfectly. Husband, provider, the man who had no idea. And then one morning, everything changed. But before I take you there, before I walk you through the quiet month that came between betrayal and consequences, I need you to understand one thing. This wasn't about winning. It was about survival. Because when someone decides your future without you in the room, sometimes silence is the loudest move you can make. And that silence was just the beginning. Before everything cracked open, life had a rhythm to it. Not exciting, not dramatic, just steady. And when you've lived long enough, you learn to respect steady. You learn to trust it. Sarah and I had that kind of life. The kind people point to and say, they've got it figured out. A modest house in a quiet neighborhood where nothing ever seemed to happen. Same creaky floorboard in the hallway. Same coffee maker groaning awake every morning at 6:10. Same two cars parked in the driveway like they'd been assigned those spots years ago and never questioned it. We weren't rich, but we were comfortable. Bills paid on time. Vacations planned a year out. Dinners at the table most nights, unless one of us worked late. We knew each other's habits so well that silence didn't feel awkward. It felt earned. Sarah used to hum while she cooked, soft under her breath. I'd sit at the table pretending to read the paper while listening to that hum and thinking, this is it. This is the rest of my life. And I was okay with that. More than okay. I was grateful. I'd been married before her. That one ended fast and loud. This marriage felt different, calmer, deeper. Built on shared years instead of fireworks. We grew into each other, not toward each other. That counts for something when you're my age. On weekends, we'd run errands together. Grocery store, hardware shop, maybe lunch at the same diner we'd been going to since our 10th anniversary. Same booth, same waitress, same order. You don't realize how much comfort there is in predictability until it disappears. Inside, I felt settled. Not passionate in a movie way, but rooted. Like a man who knew where home was. I believed we were partners, not just emotionally, but practically. Everything was joint. Accounts, plans, responsibilities, trust. That's the word that mattered most back then. Trust. If Sarah said she'd handle something, I didn't check behind her. If she was late coming home, I didn't question it. When she started spending more time on her phone, I chalked it up to work stress or friends. We were past jealousy, past insecurity, or so I thought. Looking back now, I can see the small shifts. The way she stopped asking about my day and started answering hers quicker. The way her laughter faded first, not all at once, just in pieces. The way she turned the screen of her phone slightly away when texting, like it was instinct, not intention. But when you're living inside something, you explain things away. You tell yourself everyone goes through phases. You say this is what long marriages look like. You convince yourself that questioning stability is more dangerous than trusting it. And maybe that's where I failed myself. I remember one night, weeks before I overheard that phone call. We were sitting on opposite ends of the couch, television on, volume low. She was scrolling. I was half asleep. I asked her if she wanted to visit her sister that summer, like we usually did. She paused. Just a second too long. Let's see, she said. A lot going on. That was it. Nothing dramatic. But something in the air shifted. Not enough to cause alarm. Just enough to register. Somewhere deep in my chest. I ignored it. Because that's what men like me do. We work. We provide. We endure. We don't interrogate happiness when it seems functional. We don't shake the foundation just to see if it's still solid. Now, let me ask you something before I go further. Have you ever had that gut feeling that something was off, but you ignored it because you didn't want to believe it? Tell me in the comments. I want to know I'm not alone in this. Back then, I truly believed silence meant peace. That routine meant safety. That love didn't need constant checking in. I didn't know that while I was settling deeper into comfort, Sarah was slowly stepping out of it. And the truth is, if she hadn't made that one phone call where I could hear it, if fate hadn't nudged me just enough, I might have stayed blind until it was far too late. Because the warning signs weren't loud. They were polite. And the most dangerous betrayals usually are. After that evening on the couch, the quiet didn't feel the same anymore. It wasn't peaceful. It was thin, brittle. Like ice you don't realize is cracking until your weight's already on it. I didn't accuse Sarah of anything. Not a word. I kept my voice steady. My routines intact. But something in me had shifted. And once that happens, you start noticing details you used to glide right past. The first thing I noticed was timing. She started leaving earlier in the mornings. Said traffic was worse. Said she wanted to stop for coffee. Reasonable explanations. All of them. But she also started coming home later, always with a reason that sounded prepared in advance. A coworker needed to talk. A project ran long. A friend was having a hard time. She used to look tired when she worked late. Now she looked energized. Alert. Like someone who'd just come back from somewhere that mattered. I told myself not to read into it. Told myself I was being paranoid. That marriages go through seasons. That not every change is a warning. Still, I watched. I noticed how her phone never left her hand anymore. Bathroom. Laundry room. Even when she stepped outside to take a call. She'd lower her voice the second the door closed. I couldn't hear words anymore, just tone. Light. Careful. Sometimes almost playful. That hurt more than anger would have. One night, I woke up around 2 a.m. and realized she wasn't in bed. I lay there listening. Heart thumping like I'd already been caught doing something wrong. Then I heard it, the faint sound of the back door closing. I didn't get up. I didn't follow her. I just stared at the ceiling and waited. She came back 20 minutes later. Slid into bed like nothing had happened. Her breathing settled quickly. Too quickly. Mine didn't. The next morning, she acted normal. asked if I wanted eggs or cereal, kissed my cheek on her way out the door. That kiss felt rehearsed, like muscle memory filling in for emotion. I started asking small questions, casual ones, safe ones. How's work been lately? She answered, but she didn't elaborate like she used to. Short sentences, no stories, no complaints, just enough to end the conversation. I asked if everything was okay between us. She smiled, not warmly, politely. Of course, she said. Why wouldn't it be? That was the moment my instinct spoke up loud enough that I couldn't ignore it anymore. Because if everything was okay, she wouldn't have needed to ask that question back at me. I began to realize something important during those days. Doubt doesn't arrive as a single thought. It arrives as a collection of small moments that stop lining up. And once they don't, you either confront them or you observe them. I chose to observe. I checked nothing without a reason. I searched nothing without preparation. I didn't want proof yet. I wanted patterns. Because patterns don't lie, even when people do. I started paying attention to finances. Nothing obvious at first, but small withdrawals. Cash, not large enough to set off alarms, but frequent enough to make a rhythm. When I asked about one of them, she shrugged and said groceries had gotten more expensive. That might have been true, but she used to complain about prices. Now she didn't. I noticed she'd stopped talking about the future. No summer plans. No talk about the house. No, when we retire conversations. Everything existed in the present tense now, as if the future had been quietly removed from the agreement. And the more I noticed, the calmer I became. That surprised me. I wasn't angry yet. I wasn't heartbroken yet. I was alert, like an animal that knows something's nearby in the dark. Still, listening. I remember standing at the kitchen sink one evening, watching her reflection in the window as she typed on her phone. She smiled at something she read. A real smile. The kind I hadn't seen aimed at me in months. That's when I knew. I didn't know what she was planning yet. I didn't know how far it went. But I knew this wasn't nothing. And once you know that, you don't unknow it. Folks, pause for a second. What would you have done in my position? Would you have confronted her right then? Or would you have waited and watched? Drop your answer below. I'm curious what you would have chosen. Because the choice I made next didn't come from fear or rage. It came from instinct. And that instinct told me one thing very clearly. If I moved too soon, I'd lose more than my marriage. So I stayed quiet. And I kept watching. Because whatever Sarah was doing, she believed she was invisible. And that belief was about to cost her everything. The truth doesn't usually arrive all at once. It leaks in, drip by drip. And every drip leaves a stain you can't scrub out once you've seen it. By the third week of watching, I stopped hoping I was wrong. Hope is dangerous when you're already standing on the edge. What I wanted now was certainty. Not to confront her, not yet, but to understand exactly how deep the betrayal went. The first real crack came on a Sunday afternoon. Sarah asked me to help her find an old insurance document on the computer. Said she needed it for work. Our desktop was shared. Always had been. No passwords between us. That was part of the trust we'd built. Or so I thought. I sat down, clicked through folders, and that's when I saw it. A new folder. Recently created. Play name. Nothing suspicious at first glance. But my gut tightened the second I saw the date. I didn't open it right away. I handed her the document she asked for. She thanked me. Took it upstairs. I waited. Counted my breaths. Told myself that if I went digging without reason, I'd hate the man I became. But I already had a reason. That night, after she fell asleep, I went back to the computer. Inside that folder were scanned documents, bank statements, notes, a spreadsheet, and right there at the top, a consultation invoice from a divorce attorney, dated 2 weeks earlier. I didn't feel anger. I felt hollow. I clicked slowly, carefully, like I was handling something fragile. There were notes about asset division, percentages, recommended strategy, a timeline. One line punched the air out of my lungs. Client advised to maintain normal behavior until filing to avoid financial restructuring. Normal behavior. I leaned back in the chair and stared at the ceiling, listening to the hum of the house. Every shared laugh from the past replayed in my head like evidence from a trial I never agreed to be part of. And it got worse. There were emails saved in that folder too. Conversations with someone named M. No last name. Just enough intimacy in the words to remove all doubt. They talked about starting fresh. About how hard it was pretending. About how she'd be free soon. Free. From me. I closed the folder and shut the computer down. Sat in the dark for a long time. I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I didn't even feel like breathing. This wasn't just emotional betrayal. This was strategy. Planning. Coordination. This was my wife treating our marriage like a business transaction she intended to exit cleanly, with bonuses. I lay in bed next to her that night, staring at the ceiling while she slept peacefully beside me. Her breathing steady. Calm. Like she hadn't just detonated my entire sense of reality. I remember thinking, how long has she been lying this comfortably? The next few days were a blur of quiet discoveries. I checked our financials more closely. Small accounts I hadn't paid attention to. One in her name only. New. Recently funded. I checked our joint credit. A card I didn't recognize had been opened. Everything was deliberate. Every step had been taken while I was mowing the lawn, paying bills, planning anniversaries. I need you to understand something here. This wasn't just betrayal. This was my whole life crumbling. Have you ever been blindsided like this? Someone you trusted completely, just destroying everything? Share your story below if you've been there. Let's heal together. The lowest moment came when I realized she wasn't just leaving me. She was positioning herself to leave me with nothing. The house, the savings, even my retirement. Assets I'd built long before we met. All of it was being calculated, sliced, and claimed while she kissed me goodbye every morning. That's when the sadness finally hit. Not loud, not dramatic, just a deep, quiet grief. For the man I'd been, for the marriage I thought I had, for the future I'd pictured that no longer existed. I stood in the shower one morning and let the water run until it went cold. That's when I whispered it out loud for the first time. She's really doing this. And the moment I said it, something else followed. A question. What are you going to do about it? Because I had proof now. I had clarity. And I had a choice. Collapse. Or take control. And right there, at the lowest point I'd ever stood in my adult life, I made a quiet promise to myself. I would not be blindsided. I would not be erased. And I would not be the only one surprised when this was over. Because if Sarah thought I was still asleep, she was about to learn how dangerous a quiet man can be once he wakes up. After discovery comes a strange calm. Not peace, calm. The kind that settles in when your worst fear has already happened, and there's nothing left to imagine. Once the truth is exposed, the mind stops racing and starts organizing. That's where I found myself. I didn't rush. I didn't react. I understood something crucial in those first quiet days after the discovery. Emotion was a luxury I couldn't afford yet. If I let grief drive, I'd crash. So I put it in the passenger seat and told it to wait. Every morning, I woke up the same time, made coffee, asked Sarah how she slept, listened to her talk about her day. I nodded at the right moments, smiled when expected, played my part with an accuracy that surprised even me. Inside, though, I was making lists. Not revenge fantasies. Not dramatic gestures. Practical steps. Quiet ones. First, I gathered information. Copies of everything. Financial records. Retirement statements. Property documents. Anything that proved what I'd brought into the marriage and what I'd built during it. I scanned and saved them. Stored them somewhere she'd never look. Second, I sought advice carefully. I didn't tell friends. Didn't tell family. Loose lips have a way of reaching the wrong ears. I scheduled a consultation with an attorney of my own, took a sick day from work, and walked into that office, carrying a folder thick enough to tell its own story. I didn't speak emotionally. I spoke clearly. This is what she's planning. This is what she knows. This is what I know. The attorney leaned back, nodded slowly, and said something that stuck with me. You're early. That's good. Most people come in when it's already too late. For the first time in weeks, I felt something close to relief. I learned what I could protect, what I couldn't, what moves were legal, what moves were smart. And most importantly, what timing could change everything. Third, I got quiet about money. I didn't drain accounts recklessly. I didn't make sudden changes. I adjusted things slowly, methodically, within the bounds of the law, but firmly in defense of myself. I separated what I could, documented every step. At night, when Sarah fell asleep beside me, I stared into the dark and let myself feel it. The grief, the anger, the disbelief. I didn't deny it. I just didn't let it speak for me. That balance is hard, but it's necessary. About 2 weeks into that month, Sarah started acting nervous. Subtle things. Questions about work schedules. About when I'd be home. About whether I was happy. I answered honestly, but vaguely. I'm fine, I'd say. Just tired. That wasn't a lie. I reflected a lot during that time. Not just on her betrayal, but on myself. On the years I'd assumed stability meant safety. On how I'd let comfort replace communication. None of that excused what she did, but understanding my own blind spots mattered. Because I wasn't trying to destroy her. I was trying to survive with dignity. Here's where I made my choice. Now I want to know, do you believe in revenge, or do you believe in walking away? What's the right move when someone destroys your trust? Comment below. I want to hear both sides. For me, the answer wasn't revenge. It was readiness. I decided that when this came to light, and it would, I wouldn't be the one scrambling. I wouldn't be pleading. I wouldn't be shocked. I would be prepared. The final step was patience. Harder than anything else. Pretending normalcy when every instinct wants to scream. Letting her believe she was ahead of the game. Because the truth was, by then, the game had already changed. She thought she was planning my ending. What she didn't know was that I was preparing my beginning. And when the moment came, when papers were served and masks fell, I wouldn't raise my voice. I'd simply hand her the reality she never thought I'd see coming. And that moment was closer than she realized. The morning everything broke open didn't feel special. That's the part that still surprises me. No thunder. No warning. Just sunlight slipping through the blinds like it always did. Sarah was still asleep when I got up. I moved quietly. Not out of fear. Out of habit. Coffee brewed. Tie straightened. Papers slid into a folder I'd kept hidden for weeks. Everything had a place. Everything had been rehearsed. I didn't shake. At 7:18 a.m., there was a knock at the door. Not loud. Not dramatic. Just firm. Sarah stirred. Sat up. Confused. "Who's that?" she asked. "I'm not sure," I said calmly. I opened the door and stepped aside. The process server spoke her name. The color drained from her face, so fast I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. She stammered. Looked at me. Then back at him. Took the envelope with hands that were suddenly unfamiliar, shaky, exposed. The door closed. Silence rushed in to fill the space. She turned toward me, eyes wide. "What is this?" she asked. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't smile. "It's the divorce you've been planning," I said. That's when panic arrived. She started talking fast. Too fast. Asking how I knew. Saying this wasn't how it was supposed to happen. Telling me we needed to talk. Really talk. Like we hadn't been pretending for months already. I let her speak. Then I slid my folder across the kitchen table. Inside were copies of everything. Her spreadsheet. The attorney invoice. The account transfers. The emails. She stopped mid-sentence. Her mouth opened. Closed. Opened again. "You went through my things," she whispered. I leaned forward just slightly. "You went through my life." That's when she realized the truth. Not that I was angry. Not that I was hurt. That I was prepared. I told her the accounts had already been separated. Legally. Documented. I told her my attorney had been briefed weeks ago. I told her the house was protected under premarital contribution law. I told her every move she'd planned had been anticipated. Sentence by sentence, the ground disappeared beneath her. She cried then. Real tears. The kind people save for themselves. She said she never meant to hurt me like this. Said she just wanted a clean start. Said she felt trapped. I listened. Then I said the one thing I hadn't planned, but needed to say. "You should have told me the truth when you still respected me." That broke her. And this is the moment everything changed. "Tell me, are you rooting for me right now? Or do you think I went too far?" Be honest in the comments. Uncle Mickle can take it. She asked if we could stop the process. If we could slow down. Reconsider. I shook my head. No, I said. You already made your move. I just made mine first. The silence after that was heavy. Final. She packed a bag that afternoon. No yelling. No scenes. Just the sound of drawers opening and closing. Zippers. Footsteps. A life dismantling itself in real time. At the door, she turned back once. Looked at me like she was seeing a stranger. I didn't think you had this in you, she said. I met her eyes. I didn't either. The door closed. And just like that, 18 years ended. Not with a scream, but with a click. I stood alone in the kitchen, sunlight still spilling across the floor, coffee long gone cold. And for the first time in a month, I exhaled. Because the waiting was over. The house didn't feel empty right away. That took time. At first, it felt quiet in a way that pressed against your ears. Like the air itself was holding its breath, waiting to see what I'd do next. Every room still carried her shape. Her chair at the table, her mug by the sink, the indentation on her side of the bed. I didn't rush to erase any of it. I slept poorly for the first few nights. Not because I missed her. That truth surprised me. But because my body was finally coming down from a month of tension it hadn't been allowed to release. When you spend weeks pretending everything is fine, your nervous system doesn't know how to stand down once the danger's passed. So I took things slow. I went to work, came home, cooked simple meals, cleaned one room at a time. Some evenings I sat on the back porch and listened to nothing but the wind through the trees. No phone, no noise, just stillness. The divorce moved forward quickly after that. No dramatic courtroom scenes. No last-minute confessions. She tried, once or twice, to soften things. Asked if we could split things more fairly. But fairness had already been weighed, measured, and documented. I stayed firm, calm, respectful. That surprised her. And if I'm honest, it surprised me too. I thought I'd feel victorious. Or angry. Or relieved in some cinematic way. Instead, I felt tired, deeply bone-tired, like a man who just carried something heavy for a long time and finally set it down. There were losses, real ones. Friends chose sides. Some drifted away without saying why. Holidays felt strange that first year, quiet in places they used to be full. And there were moments, late at night, when memories would sneak up on me and knock the wind out of my chest. But there were gains, too. I found myself breathing easier, sleeping deeper, laughing, real laughter, without checking the room first. I started taking walks after dinner. Just me, the sidewalk, and my thoughts. Somewhere along the way, those thoughts stopped circling the same old questions. I wasn't asking why anymore. I was asking what's next. I took a weekend trip alone for the first time in decades. Sat in a diner in a town no one knew me in. Ordered breakfast at noon. Talked to nobody. It felt strangely powerful, realizing I didn't need an audience to feel whole. Sarah and I spoke once more, months later. A short call. Civil, final. She sounded different. Smaller. Maybe that's just how distance works. Or maybe reality had finally caught up. When we hung up, I didn't feel anger. I felt done. Looking back now, I wonder if I'd do it all the same way again. What about you? If you could go back and handle your worst betrayal differently, would you? Or was the pain necessary to become who you are now? Let me know below. Because here's the truth no one tells you. Healing doesn't come from winning. It comes from reclaiming yourself. From realizing that someone else's deception doesn't get to define the rest of your life unless you let it. I didn't come out of that marriage richer or happier overnight. I came out clearer. Clear about my boundaries. Clear about my worth. Clear about the fact that silence can be strength when it's chosen, not forced. The house eventually changed. New furniture. Different rhythms. My life stopped echoing with what used to be. And in that space, something steady returned. Not the old comfort. A new one. Earned. Time as a way of sanding down the sharpest edges. Not erasing them, just making them easier to live with. It's been long enough now that I can tell this story without my chest tightening, without my voice catching halfway through a sentence. That's how I know I made it to the other side. If there's one thing I've learned, it's this. Betrayal doesn't always announce itself with shouting or slammed doors. Sometimes it comes quietly, wearing the face of routine. And when it does, you have two choices: panic or pause. I chose to pause. Not because I'm smarter than anyone else. Not because I'm colder or stronger. But because something inside me understood that reacting in the heat of pain would have cost me more than staying silent ever did. Silence, when chosen carefully, gave me time. And time gave me clarity. I don't tell this story so you'll cheer for me. I tell it because I know someone listening right now feels that same unease I felt, that subtle sense that something isn't right, even though everything looks fine on the surface. If that's you, hear me clearly. Trust your awareness. Don't ignore it just because facing the truth feels uncomfortable. Comfort can be a cage if you never question it. I didn't win my divorce. There were no trophies, no victory laps. What I gained was something quieter and far more valuable: self-respect. The kind that comes from knowing you didn't beg for honesty, didn't settle for lies, and didn't disappear just to keep the peace. So here's my final question for you, and I really want to hear your thoughts. Is it better to forgive and move on, or to make sure they understand exactly what they lost? There's no wrong answer. Drop it in the comments. Because every story like this is different. Every scar has its own shape. And sometimes, hearing how others survived helps us understand how we might survive too. So that's my story, folks. If it resonated with you, go ahead and hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments where you're listening from. I want to know how far Uncle Mickle's voice travels. And here's the one truth I earned the hard way. When someone shows you who they really are, believe them. And make sure you don't lose yourself trying to save what was never honest to begin with.